and record locally. All right. Hello, everyone. Well, it's good to see you all. As the coordinator of the seminar, when there's, I didn't have anybody to cover today, that meant that I had to do it. Hello, everyone. Well, it's good to see you all. Yeah, live stream, stop. There we go. So that means that, what does that mean? Yes, that means that I need to, that it was my job to organize different things. And among other things, I reached out to the members of my group, and before, when I've reached out to them to host the different speakers, it's like Matt Earlham, yes, Chris Brown, sure, Zhu Mao, definitely, Jim Warren, Teresa Pollock. Sure, but great. So I'll be hosting this week. Anybody interested in, or I'll be speaking. Anybody interested in hosting, introducing, or connecting Q&A? Everybody's like, gee, I hope it goes well. Yeah, really. So no, really, I love my research group. They're terrific. But it was interesting to see no takers for hosting today's meeting, today's seminar. So. I wanted to clarify one other quick thing from 2 weeks ago that I forgot to clarify during Tony Seba's seminar, which was toward the end of the Q&A. I talked about the work of someone named Alan Savory, who has claimed that adding that if you manage cattle properly, that you can increase the carbon absorption of the soil and green the world's deserts and reverse climate change. As it turns out, there's really not much evidence to back up his claims. Certainly right for speaking about something that I really have no expertise in. So today I'm going to talk about something that I have a little bit of expertise in, which is entrepreneurship and academia. Let me bring this up. And no problem. Let me see. So, and let me share my screen. There we go. So my career has really been in academia and as an entrepreneur. I started off after my PhD with a postdoc and then an academic position and then a couple of different startups, but really one that can be called a startup. The other was a consultancy. So I'll talk a little bit about that today. And so I'll start off with a question, why talk about entrepreneurship in academia? I'll talk about a bunch of resources that are available here at WPI and in general in Eastern Massachusetts, and a couple of events coming up both tonight and tomorrow that might be interesting to some of you. Talk a good bit about my own personal experience as an entrepreneur, and in particular, some of the lessons learned in that experience. And I'll close by talking about briefly about how academia is fundamentally different from a company in the work that we do, and then summarize. So to start out, why entrepreneurship in academia? Well, there are some very common ways that we work across academic research and others. So we start with an idea. Great, I have an idea. I'm going to do some research on it. We assess its feasibility. This can either mean doing some kind of a model, some calculations that show this might work, and then basically try to reduce risk as much as possible. We shop the idea to funding agencies and say, look, we've done this work. You might have done even a preliminary experiment. It says that it might work. So you should fund this to get it going. And then we conduct the research. We get to some kind of a significant proof of concept, or some step change in knowledge, and then we hand off that knowledge, that concept to if it's a new technology, to a startup company or to an industrial company. can go a variety of different ways from there. But a startup company is kind of similar. You start with an idea, right? I have an idea, let's do things this way. We assess the feasibility somewhat, and we shop it to customers and investors, right? We want to know if this idea has traction in the market and if anybody will fund its development. You don't always need investors or development funding. Some startups are self-funded, and that can either mean that you have a very cheap idea, or you have a lot of money, or something that will take a very short time to quickly get to market. But very often for significant startup companies, we're going to shop it to investors as well. We develop it until we get to something called the minimum viable product, and then we start to test that minimum viable product in the marketplace, and then we either scale it, do an IPO, or hand off to industry. It's important to those investors to have some kind of an exit, right, where they can sell their shares in the company, whether that's initial public offering of stock on a stock market, or a sale to a sale of the company to some larger company that then uses the technology. So for this reason, if you want to work in academia, or you want to work in a startup company, it's good to kind of think about some of these entrepreneurship processes. But it doesn't just end there. If you want to work in a company eventually, an industrial company, doing research, a lot of the steps are the same. Companies' research and development organization will have some idea. If you're the idea person, you'll try to figure out its feasibility. You'll shop it to the business units, which are the internal different divisions of the company that might commercialize it. You'll work on the technology development prototype, and then look at the market. And finally, you'll scale it, and you'll scale the production within the company, or maybe the company will sell the technology somewhere else. But so some of these same skills of presenting the idea to people, selling it, presenting some of its benefits, maybe some of its limitations, apply across the board, no matter where you go in your career, whether you become a professor or a startup entrepreneur or an industrial researcher, or even if you're in a government research lab. They really have to justify all of their research, and very often justify it to industry and to industrial customers. So you spend all of this time learning to do research, and end up spending most of your time, not spending most of your time, end up having communication being one of your most important skills. And in particular, communication to customers. If you're in a company, whether a startup or an industry, or in a government lab as well. So what are customers in academia? Well, we think we know who's going to be our customer. We think that this new ceramic material is going to be great for the electronics industry. Well, most of the time we're wrong. And it's not just about academics. In just about any new technology, we think about it because there's some existing need. You might need to reduce costs, or might need to improve some processes. And so we think the people who need that material, that device with lower costs, et cetera, is going to want to buy this new technology. And very often, it's some other market that needs it, some other customer. I'll get back to that in just a minute. But first, let's talk about resources at WPI to help you learn some of these skills in working with customers and others. So there's the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center, which is a team that has a variety of different programs. This is just a subset of their programs. Of course, the makerspace at, I keep wanting to call it FOISI, at the Innovation Studio building. Winter session. Winter session is relatively short here. Tinkerbox, if you have some kind of an idea for a startup company that it may be related, but it should be some distinct activity from your research, Tinkerbox can give you $5,000 to pursue it. It's often for undergrads. If it's something related to your research, you really have to show how it's distinct from the what you would already be doing for your master's or PhD research. Mentors in Residence is a program that brings people from industry to talk with potential entrepreneurs. And the Tech Advisors Network is a wonderful network of WPI related entrepreneurs that just happens to have a meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. In the past, pre-pandemic, these have been held in the Innovation Studio, at least since I've been here. I guess I arrived just as Innovation Studio started. And but since the pandemic, it's all been virtual, which is too bad because they had some pretty good food, but not just food, but a lot of really good networking time to talk with people about what kind of research are you doing, what kind of ideas do you have for a startup, et cetera. A really rich networking gathering. I hope it can return to an in-person format as soon as possible. So other things here at WPI, the Technology Commercialization Office led by Todd Kaler. Oh, I should mention Innovation Entrepreneurship. Darn, I forgot to look up his name before starting the seminar, but it's led by a Material Science and Engineering PhD. And if any of you knows his name, feel free to just jump in with it. But Todd Kaler at Technology Commercialization, you'll know them mainly by their primary function of patent prosecution. That's what they spend a lot of their time on, but there are a variety of other things that they do as well. Todd, more than most other people, knows the network of WPI startup companies and potential mentors, including industrial contacts at major companies in Massachusetts and beyond. The other really big thing which is helpful to know about is the I-Corps site program. So I-Corps is a National Science Foundation program which works with basically scientists and engineers and teaches them to do something called customer discovery, which is something that's completely foreign to us, which is not a big issue, right? I guess it's easier to teach an engineer to some business skills than to teach a business person how to do engineering, right? But so customer discovery is the process of putting together, based on your technology, what is the value proposition, or what do you think is the value proposition? The key thing that makes it important and worth paying for customers. And then you go out and you have to do 30 interviews of prospective customers, prospective suppliers, different stakeholders, mostly customers. And it's in that process of learning about the customer, not saying, here's my invention, isn't it great? But saying, what is it that you do and what is it that you need? You try to prove or disprove your hypotheses about the market and about your customers, and get some data that can help you to develop your technology. So my research group has 3 different teams involved. I can sort of claim credit for 2 because they're based on research activities, but the third was actually a master's project of a student before they came to my group. They are all in clean tech, and I'd be glad to refer you to them. I think all 3 of them are here on this Zoom, so you're welcome to ask them questions about their experience in this process. Well, maybe 2 out of 3, but in any case, yes, the teams have to do these 30 interviews, and to get 30 interviews in the space of about 3 months, you have to reach out and contact somewhere between 60 and 150 different prospective people, and just go through LinkedIn, go through Todd's network that I mentioned, go through your advisors network, for example. And it's really hard to get that many interviews, but once you do, you learn a ton. And as I mentioned, most of these startup companies, they think they know where their primary market is going to be, but they end up pivoting and thinking about some other market in this process. And that's really helpful to do when you're relatively early in the research process, because you can adapt your research toward that primary market and toward for example, when we well, I'll get to Infinium in a moment, but we went out and did a little bit of customer discovery, kind of inadvertently. It wasn't really a thing back when we started. More on that later. Okay, so there's another resource here at WPI called the Sweet Center. It stands for something like supporting WPI with effective something teamwork. They really help any team of people to understand what are the strengths and weaknesses, what are the dynamics that are positive or negative within this team, and help teams to be at their best. I recommend this to all of my MQP teams that they spend some time there. They may be dysfunctional, they may be working great, but nonetheless, some time with them, some good evidence-based tools and techniques, things that can help teams work better. So please explore the WPI Sweet Center. Beyond WPI, there are various different incubators in the area and support groups. Support groups, that doesn't quite sound right. But so WorkLab is in downtown Worcester. They have a bit of space. They do really well for software type of innovations. The workshop is off about 20 minutes west of here. It's a huge 50,000 square foot space. They have all kinds of metalworking tools and different things, some of which we have here at WPI as well. But if you didn't have access to the Washburn shops, then for artists or entrepreneurs, it's a great place. You can rent space there, etc. Membership starts at just $125 a month to have full access to welding and metalworking. Mass Inventor. Forge is an organization that helps Massachusetts manufacturing businesses. Their executive director, Laura Teicher, T-E-I-C-H-E-R, I've only corresponded with her in writing. She's going to be our speaker in 2 weeks, I believe. It should be a very interesting talk, and if you're interested in these resources, she'll be a great person to talk with to learn more about what's an appropriate resource for your idea, your startup, etc. Greentown Labs is the largest clean tech incubator, I believe still, in the United States, and they're based in Somerville. A really neat organization. Brought a couple of members of the research group to a couple of their events. And by the way, they have their Climate Tech Summit tomorrow. The main program with speakers, etc., runs from 9:30 to 4:30. There'll be breakfast starting at 8:30 and going until a 10th anniversary celebration from 5:30 to 7:30 tomorrow night. You can register for, I'm not sure if they're still accepting registration for the in-person. It's $75, or you can go online and it's free. Members of my group, let me know if you're interested in the live event. But anyway, yeah, so Greentown Labs has not only a couple dozen active startup companies, mainly from technology readiness level 5 to 7, from some minimum viable product to just about ready to launch. They also have a whole bunch of different funders, and that's everything from existing energy companies, including some oil and gas companies that are interested in diversifying into into clean tech, venture capital firms, etc. You name it. So it's a big event, large space, great organization if you're in clean tech or interested in it. Never. The Greater Worcester Chamber of Commerce has something called Startup Worcester. It's a contest every year that leads to something like 10 different company finalists that go through a mentoring program right here in Worcester. It can be pretty interesting. A lot of them are software, some biotech, different things. I think they haven't had a lot of materials applicants, so it could be an interesting to do. Massachusetts Clean Energy Center has some great funding opportunities for startups and also for academics. So in fact, I know that Yan Wang has had a couple of small grants from them as well. Mass Bio, the Mass Biotech Council, if your work is biotech focused, is we have just about the strongest biotech hub in the country, if not in the world, here in Massachusetts. And this Mass Biotechnology Council and the Mass Clean Energy Center are two quasi-government agencies that provide, that convene companies and funders, that provide some funding, that really help to maintain this ecosystem of academia and startups and big companies, funding agencies here in Massachusetts in these two key industries that we have here. I'll mention one other thing that in addition to the explicitly entrepreneurship-focused activities, things like I-Corps and the other activities here on campus, the Technology Advisor Network and Innovation Entrepreneurship, the Metal Processing Institute centers have a very strong model for engaging directly with customers. Each of the centers, whether the ACRC, the casting center that has since recently moved to UC Irvine, the heat treating center, the recycling center, it's a requirement that every PhD student funded by them get up in front of all of the companies and talk about your project every 6 months, both talk to the whole assembly of all of the companies and then talk to the focus group. And that model has been very successful at transferring technology to the companies and also creating startups, including what's perhaps WPI's, I want to say that, I'll say most successful materials startup recently, maybe. Anyway, which is Battery Resources, a battery, a nickel, a lithium ion battery recycling startup coming out of Yan Wang's group, led by Eric Grotz, who is a postdoc in that group. So the MPI centers are really terrific. You get to engage directly with not just customers, but people who have a lot of experience in those industries and can help make decisions, et cetera. I'm going to talk about that more as we have time. So I'll turn next to my own entrepreneurship experience. We started off as Metal Oxygen Separation Technologies, Inc., most with a silent X. The joke was the silent X as in Bordeaux. It was a terrible name. We changed our name about 5 years into Infinium, which kind of the clean metal element. Clean metal production for clean energy was the tagline, and I kind of give away the ending here that the company ceased its operations and sold all of its assets last summer. So just as a brief timeline, I met the co-founder in June of 2008. By the end of that summer, we'd submitted our first SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research proposal to NASA. It failed, and that was an interesting one. We called up the program manager and said, we see this program. It looks really interesting. Can you tell us more about it? So here's our technology. And the program manager said, I really wish I could talk with you, but because the solicitation is out already, I'm not allowed to by NASA rules, and it's a really dumb rule. And please complain about this because we really want to see it changed. So, we spent, a good, 50, 70 hours each putting together this great proposal. We put it in, and it came back with a one-line rejection. NASA has already considered and rejected this approach. So it's one reason why the program manager really wishes that it could have talked with us. But it could have just saved us all of that time. We both had other full-time pursuits, and just it's a lot of time. So then we submitted an SBIR proposal to the National Science Foundation, and it was funded. I'll say a couple of things, quick lessons from that. One is, although they say that only 10 small business proposals, and 10% of them are funded, there are a lot of really bad proposals out there, people who don't know what they're doing, people who violate the second law of thermodynamics. If you have a really good idea and can write well, you probably have about a 50% chance of funding rather than a 10% chance. So yeah, if you want to start a small business, this is a great way to start and just create your company, get registered on the websites, submit an SBI proposal to NSF. You may fail the first time and succeed the second time, but a good idea will very likely get funded. So we visited the Department of Energy in January 2009. My wife and I happened to be in Washington, D.C. for the inauguration, and so I contacted the program manager of Vehicle Technologies, saying, "Hey, we've got this this new metal production technology for magnesium. You've funded its inventor at Boston University. I'd love to get to talk with you." So I talked with them, and the co-founder said, "Hey, if you're going to talk with them, I want to be there too." So we both went down to DC, and we met with the program manager. And great, thank you, Sarah. Another great resource for entrepreneurs at WPI. Great, and we talked with him, and about 2 weeks later, it was teaching as an adjunct faculty member at Boston University. I got a call from this program manager. He said, "Hey, Adam, we're getting some new funding from the Obama administration. Are you guys able to do some research and development on that technology you mentioned?" And I said, "Yes." I tried to use all of the buzzwords at the time. We're shovel ready. We've got people ready to go. And so, the next day, co-founder and I had a 3-page white paper on his desk with a potential budget for funding this project. And it took a year and a half to get our first funding there, and about 4 years to get the kind of money that he wanted to give us, new procedures, long story. Anyway, I'm going too slowly. So that July, we started the NSF project. We had 260 square feet of space, which is barely enough for our 2 desks. But we worked together with Boston University on some proof of concepts that got us going. Following January, I really owe it to my co-founder, who I'll call him Steve. He coordinated everything. So our first investment, our 10,000 square foot space lease that we signed, our technology license from Boston University, and employee number 3 all came together within about 1 week. So we had money, we had the big space, we had technology officially going, and we had the start of a team. So our first DOE grant came in that summer. Like I mentioned, a year and a half after the first visit to DOE. And that and the NSF, which was $100,000 from NSF, ended up being the beginning of a very good run, a total of $17 million in government grants, $4.5 million in investment, all from the same group. I'll get back to why that was in just a minute. But the team peaked at 30 people. We had a full machine shop, a great characterization lab with an SEM, an ICP, which is now in Sagamore, carbon and oxygen LECO equipment, just a terrific set of electrolysis experiments. The technology was electrolysis production of metals, magnesium, silicon, aluminum, and rare earths, a little of which has kind of entered my research group since then, but also efficient distillation of magnesium metal by this gravity-assisted or gravity-driven multiple effect thermal system, which I presented on 6 or 8 months ago, a while ago. Anyway, so was a great run. So what went well? I had a terrific relationship with the co-founder, and we really complemented each other's skills very well. We were very good at writing proposals. I wrote the technology. He wrote the commercialization section. He had a terrific set of experience in entrepreneurship. We each kind of deferred to each other's expertise. For the most part, we complemented each other well. We both we overlapped as undergrads, and in engineering, he was in mechanical, I was in materials, so he knew something about the materials. I didn't really know much about the startup world or entrepreneurship. I'll get back to that in a minute. We had excellent timing. As I mentioned, the Department of Energy was just starting to put a lot of funding into clean technology, and our clean metal production for clean energy resonated very well as a key enabling technology. Outstanding team. Because we started in the economic downturn, we were able to bring in some really good people. Massachusetts is a great place to start a company. There are some outstanding people, both coming right out of school and with significant experience. There's just a lot of turnover in various startups. There's a great infrastructure for it. I'd be glad to share more about that, but things like finance and law. So terrific team. Most aspects of the company culture were really good. We had just a regular Monday morning meeting of the leadership team. We had a regular Friday lunch where we talked about various topics. Once a month, it was about safety. I'll say, especially the safety culture was terrific. And the best thing about the culture was that we learned quickly. So, for example, Matt Earlham, last week's speaker, right? I think it was last week. He came in about 6 or 7 years in, and he came in. He said, "You all don't have any standard operating procedures." So he came in at a Friday lunch. He said, "Put together this standard operating procedure template, and here are the different pieces and how they work." He was living in Colorado at the time, and he would fly back and forth. 1 week in Massachusetts, 1 week in Colorado. So he presented this template for a standard operating procedure, went back to Colorado. When he returned, we had 7 standard operating procedures written and ready for his review. He said, "Wow, this is amazing." They just you learn quickly, open to new ideas. So a great culture in a lot of ways. We did some major pivots. I talked about the pivots that happened in I-Core. We went from magnesium metal to magnesium rare earth master alloys. We went from the solid oxide membrane anodes to a carbon anode for rare earth metal production, because that was the right anode to use. And although if you use a carbon anode, oxide ions, they make CO2. We were able to get our rare earth project to eliminate perfluorocarbon emissions. These are CF4, C2F6, have 6,000 to 10,000 times the global warming potential of CO2 and persist in the atmosphere for thousands of years. The Chinese rare earth industry emits about as much perfluorocarbon content as their entire aluminum industry, despite the fact that their aluminum industry produces 1,000 times more metal by mass, 6,000 times more by mole. So we were able to eliminate perfluorocarbon emissions and have a 98% lower greenhouse basis emissions because of the elimination of those perfluorocarbons. It's just a really dirty industry. So and clean metal production for clean energy. We had a really terrific technology for making aluminum scandium master alloys from the lowest cost inputs to outputs, and really caught industry as the mines were ramping up. It's a long story, I could tell it, but basically a license to print money. And I hope that, well, okay, yeah, timing worked really well. Kind of. I'll get to what didn't work well about it in a moment. So what went wrong at Infinium? This was the 2015 blizzards. Personal flaws. So when you're in a startup company, the flaws of the founders become really important. and can really cripple the whole organization. In my case, I am very conflict averse. It is very difficult for me to criticize someone, and it's not for any really bad experience. Every time I kind of pushed past my comfort zone and said to someone, you really need to do this differently. I said to my co-founder, you were really harsh on that employee. I think you really need to talk with him. Every time I did it, it was successful. It led to great outcomes, but I just have this internal barrier to giving criticism, or to the fear of the conflict that might arise. And as a result, a lot of our zirconia membrane research went really slowly, because we put for at one point, for about a year, someone was in charge of it who kept going down a dead-end street, and I didn't challenge him on it, didn't say, okay, we have these other ideas on how to make it better. Let's try them. So we just kept trying his idea baseline, and it just kept not working. And a year in technology development is an eternity. That really made that whole technology area not work for the company, and I ended up having to give it up completely. In the co-founder's case, he refused to learn. He felt like he had everything that he needed. He had all of the skills, all of the background, and he was going to be a different startup founder. He wasn't going to hand off to another CEO. He was going to take the company all the way, which is a great goal, and some people can pull it off. But when you don't accept advice, then you're really very limited in how far you can go. So for my part, I also trusted the co-founder's experience in entrepreneurship without verification and outside checks. So, when he said, our board of directors is made up myself and him and one or two investors, one and then two and then one again, it's a long story. But he said, we really have to carefully manage the information that we tell to the board and to the investors, which is generally true. I trusted him, and I trusted him to a fault. And as a result, we were excessively secretive, both internally with our investors, which led to an erosion of trust, and externally with prospective new investors. Every time that we talked to the venture capital company, they would ask questions, and my co-founder and CEO would either not answer the question or defer or make jokes. We had a marketing person come in, marketing meaning for investment mainly. And he had a lot of experience with a couple of successful startups that attracted venture capital investment, that grew, that exited successfully. One of them, and so he came in and he would say that at VC meetings with venture capitalists, he would, they would ask a question, he would start to answer it, and the CEO would crack jokes, and so that just turned them off. We never got any additional investment outside for our initial people, who kind of had to double down to try to make good on their investment. So that was a big problem. We didn't get the initial invention to work, as I mentioned, that zirconia anodes, but we got a lot of other things to work. Internal and external trust broke down. As things didn't work, the CEO tried a lot of what we call chemical metallurgy get-rich-quick schemes, which were kind of doomed to fail. If they were going to work, someone else would probably have done them. We wanted to get into powder metallurgy production, but that's already really a commodity, and we didn't have any competitive advantage. So he proposed some ideas that were really not very good to me and to the investors, and we said no. And eventually, he had to go. And the investors ousted the co-founder because I had participated in this secrecy, because I hadn't been fully disclosive about problems, about the delays in the initial invention, the zirconia anode. they didn't trust me. And so as a result, they micromanaged the company. We had a group of engineers that said, we've done a good amount of this research on rare earths. We proved that the rare earths that we make can make a good magnet. In fact, a better magnet than Chinese rare earths. Is one data point. It's not statistically significant, but nonetheless, we trumpeted it and said, "Great, yeah, our rare earths are better than Chinese rare earths." So, let's try to do some factor space experiments in this. And so we talked to the lead investor, who's then the president after the co-founder was ousted, said, "We need a $1,000 graphite crucible to make this work." And he said, "Well, okay, put your ideas on paper and send me a proposal, and I'll think about it, and we'll discuss it." So we sent him a proposal. Like 2 days later, $1,000. Mind you, our monthly rent was $15,000, and our monthly payroll at that time was somewhere around 40 or 50,000. But he said, "Well, I don't know, $1,000, that's a lot to spend." And so he took 6 weeks and did not make a decision because he wasn't sure it was the right thing to do. And finally, one of the engineers found a piece of graphite and hogged it out into a crucible shape. It wasn't as tall as we needed it to be. And so we did about 2 months of experiments, really good experiments that developed what we knew about the anode and cathode reactions. Some great work. We're ready to commercialize. But at that point, after seeing that absentee micromanagement, I applied to WPI, and so here I am. So the primary lessons, I'd say, culture eats strategy for breakfast is a saying that I've talked about with regard to safety culture. The culture of the company is really much more important than the strategy. If you have a culture where people are open to learning, where they listen to each other, where they then they'll all collaborate well. Safety is an important area of this. You can have all the safety programs you want if the culture isn't one about respecting everybody who's working on it. And if somebody says that looks dangerous, okay, let's stop doing it and let's think about how to make it less dangerous, or think about maybe why it actually isn't as dangerous as it looks. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, both good and bad. This is one reason that after having seen the Infinium develop its mission, vision, and core values, it was one of the first things that I did for the research group, was to do that. And you'll see that front and center on our website. I think I don't emphasize these enough in our research group meetings, but nonetheless, this is really important. People and relationships are central, especially that key relationship between myself and the co-founder. As soon as things didn't go well because of my flaws, he lost some trust in me. He tried things that were doomed to fail, etc. Central. Know yourself very well. Know your own strengths and weaknesses, and be sure to seek out and accept help from others in order to try to deal with some of those weaknesses. If I had worked more on overcoming some of my weaknesses, then I could have done a lot better, made technology development move a lot more quickly, or fail faster and work more on the things that did work. And of course, co-founder's problem was lack of seeking out and accepting help from others. Including, I tried to get him a mentor who had successfully negotiated a $4 billion exit. And he said, nope, I don't need to, maybe you can talk with him, Adam, but I don't need to listen to him. I know what I'm doing. Know what and when to disclose, what and when to protect. And this is, general rule is as much as necessary and not more. Your investors don't need to know all of the details of the semiconductor band structure or electrochemistry, etc. They need to know what they need to give them what they need to know to make investment and funding decisions to help steer the company toward good customers, good strategy, etc. And this is really not straightforward. No one size fits all, right? Red Hat Linux discloses everything to the public, right? Everything is open source. Every single discussion on email lists is public and open to outside scrutiny, including disagreements between internal developers. If they do any consulting work for a company to make their product work better, they do that with the upfront disclosure to the company. Everything we do is going to go into our open source products. It's going to be 100% disclosed. On the other hand, ceramics is almost the opposite. In ceramics, you really want to keep everything as a trade secret, because if you disclose how you make something, it's very easy for someone else to make the same thing. If you try to patent a process, someone will say, I didn't make it that way. And it's really hard to reverse engineer. So ceramics companies are extremely secretive and tight-lipped. So no one size fits all. So just to close, let me talk about this quickly. Academia versus company has similar ends of technology R&D and similar processes, but fundamentally different goals. Corporations want return, and by return I mean money, dividends, exit, to the shareholders. Academia, it's about education and knowledge development for society. So with those different goals come some differences in things. For example, in academia, we really want to disclose everything in our publications, make them enabling so that someone else can build on that. And if you have 10 publications that are based on yours, then that's the currency of academia is that that knowledge development. Someone is using it. Someone has cited my work. That's the number one kind of currency for us. So corporations develop and maintain advantages in academia. We build on others and share knowledge openly. That's kind of the goal of the patent system. So that's the main mechanism by which academic research ends up going into startups. And if you're in ceramics or some aspects of metal processing, that can be kind of tough because there's kind of an incentive to keep some trade secrets back and not talk about them so that you can commercialize them in a startup. But my experience with that is that even with academic collaborators on ceramics who don't want to disclose things, they generally end up not commercializing, not successfully commercializing that. So within academia, talk about what you're doing, how you're doing it. Within a company, disclose as much information as is needed, but no more, right? Enough to Tesla talks about their vehicle exoskeleton for the Cybertruck. Well, it's the same thing that car companies have been doing for decades with a unibody. They'll brag about their gigacastings, whatever. It creates a buzz and it creates some excitement, but they don't talk about how they developed that aluminum alloy or et cetera, how they design their vehicles. So I had a summary slide. All right. Anyway, so I encourage you to learn about and develop some of the skills for entrepreneurship. If I can be helpful in connecting you with external resources. And don't forget Technology Advisors Network tonight at 6 p.m. and Greentown Labs Climate Tech Summit tomorrow all day, either virtual or in person. So thanks very much. I'll take questions in the 5 or 6 minutes that we have before we should probably do an official wrap up. So, any questions? Curtis Abel, thank you. Yes, he's the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Director. Thanks. Yeah, and as I mentioned, a material science person. So. no other questions. Well, I guess it's not a problem that we don't have somebody hosting for Q&A if there's no Q and there's no A. Let me see if there's anything else that I was interested in. Anything else I left out?
I do have a question.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you.
Do you see yourself doing a entrepreneurship thing again?
Maybe. So I guess the short answer is yes, because we're already doing it, right? There's a startup that spun out of our group. I was just there yesterday. I spent about 3 hours with Mohammed Asadikia, who is a postdoc in Yu Zhang's group and then in my group. Yeah, we're trying to again get to some customers first and foremost, a good process which works and meets customer specs, some funding, and it has its first funding. So I did most of the work in just registering on the government websites because I've done it before. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be glad to. Oh, yes, thank you. I didn't see the question today. Good grief. Yeah, so let's launch today's poll. Please, I didn't take attendance any other way, so please answer the question. Are you interested in working on a startup? Yeah, as far as leadership in a startup, maybe we'll see how this, I think things are going pretty well here in the research group at WPI. And I learned a lot. It was a lot of fun. It was great to build a team. It would be fun to do again. But I'm going to see. I think for right now, I would really like to help others to start and build startup companies, and so if all goes well with all of these technologies, we may have as many as 5 startup companies out of the group within the next couple of years. So I think that's pretty exciting, and in some ways more than one startup, and I love teaching. So long answer to your question, but okay. Any others? Other questions?
Hi, Principal. I have a question.
Sure.
So my question is, what made you switch from academia to the startup world? I mean, that's sort of an unusual transition. So,
well, it's not as usual. It's not as unusual as you think. I know several people who've done that. So the first thing was being turned down for tenure at my first academic job, and looking around. It takes a long time to get another academic job. I actually got a consulting job, and that worked pretty well. And I was doing some interesting consulting work, but wanted to have some more freedom to pursue particular consulting avenue. And so I went out on my own and did okay, not especially great, but okay. And then I was very interested in this technology that Powell had developed, this zirconia technology. So when I found the right person, I as I mentioned, met this co-founder, and I had talked with a few other people about it. And the thing about Steve was not just that he had the right background, but that he was also very interested. He didn't say, "Oh, metals, that's nice. Isn't that a Rust Belt industry? Isn't China doing all of that?" He actually thoughtfully pursued it and looked into it and said, "Okay, maybe there is something here, and there's a significant margin." And looked into some of the reasons why other companies hadn't done so well, and so our energy built on each other, and he was looking for a startup to work with, particularly in industry, and that the clean tech angle fit well, and I was looking for someone with business experience, yeah, he ended up being a great person to work with for a long time. So but that's kind of the process by which that happened. Yeah, if we'll see if the right opportunity comes along, maybe I'll go back to a new startup. But otherwise, I think I'm really enjoying seeing all of these potential startups come up, and yeah, I would love to see all of them succeed. Other questions? Let's see. Yeah, the Technology Advisor Network is I hope that will be, yeah, the in-person events are really so much better than virtual. I very highly recommend them. I met some really interesting people at Greentown Labs events. It's worth the trek into Somerville. So if you're interested, I don't know if in-person registration is still available or if it's sold out, but yeah, but highly recommend it. Yeah, some people interested in entrepreneurship, some people whose companies are climbing fast, some people in funding who are looking for ventures to start, etc. So that just things that you can't get from an online meeting. And it's a great opportunity to have them right here in the Boston area. There's one other startup group that I'm trying to think of that has had meetings here at WPI. They've met several times pre-pandemic, of course, at the campus center. I'm trying to remember the name of it. But they do a lot of
Venture Forum, if I'm not.
Venture Forum. Thank you. Yes, you've been to a couple of them. That's right. Yes. So yeah, there's a lot of biotech, some software, not a lot of materials, but a packed room in the Odium every time, Odium B and C, I guess. Yeah, and again, talking, there's no substitute for talking with people, whether it's for customer discovery, like in the I-Core program. And again, you know, the in-person meetings with potential customers are better than Zooms, which are better than phone calls, which are much better than emails. Yeah, so, all these other gatherings of entrepreneurs in the area, very interesting, very, very helpful to go to. Okay, don't get too distracted from your main research areas, but yeah, some great opportunities to develop skills and potentially take your research to the next level, make it more relevant for either existing companies to pick up or for starting a startup company yourself. And I'd say there's probably no better time than this one. You know, you may feel like you don't have money, you don't have time. When you have a mortgage, when you have kids, really won't have as much flexibility as you have now. So just not to say that it's too late, I guess. We started Infinium when I was much older than most of you grad students, and I'll just leave it at that for right now. Yeah, so you know, if you have any other questions, feel free to email. I'd be glad to talk with you. Okay, have a good week. We'll see each other again next week for John Allison from the University of Michigan. Interesting kind of research to industry, back to academia transition. So some really great fundamental technology. Look forward to seeing you next week. All right. Bye.
Thank you.